Aloha, children of the night, and welcome to the Tiki Goth Club. Today, we are talking about a question that I stumbled upon, and I never really thought about it much. I mean, me and Doc, this is Doc, he's the singer of my we used to be in the...
Have you lost count of all the fucking bands we've covered?
Yeah, now we're
Damned Zig.
The Cramps and
Damned Zig.
Damn Zig.
God damn Zig.
That's a great name. But now we have Theme for a Jackal, which is our Misfits tribute band. And a question came up that I thought I would know the answer right off the bat, but the more I thought about it, I'm like, okay, well, what is it? And that question is not what is your favorite horror movie, or what's your favorite, or like even like what's your favorite type of horror movie? Like your favorite horror movies, what is it about them that makes them your favorite? Like, what is it? What's the reoccurring factor in this?
Well, yeah, that's a heavy question, because it's like my favorite question when somebody asks you, what do you love about rock and roll? And you just look them in the eye and you go, everything.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with horror movies.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so great. It's such a wide variety, and you could go down the history and the decades of certain types of horror movies, and I can find something that I love about every single one of those decades. You know, with zombie. Think about the history of zombie movies.
Yeah.
Some people love zombie movies. That's all they like. I love the history of zombie movies, like starting with White Zombie, with Bela Lugosi and Voodoo, and then it cruises into the 40s, and you had movies like I Walked with a Zombie, and then in the 50s it was like, I think you had, you had like Ed Wood movies, Plan 9.
So Night of the Living Dead wasn't...
Night of the Living Dead was the 60s. Late 60s. But
that wasn't the first zombie movie, though.
No, there was a lot of but it was more like primitive zombie movies, like, dealt with a lot of voodoo. Night of the Living Dead, when that came out, that was like, that hit people over the head. Nobody was expecting anything like that, because it was very real. Like, people were like, it was like they were watching kind of like a snuff film in a way, because they were like, where did this come from? And then that just led into like the 70s. Of course, you had like the Dawn of the Dead movies. And then in the 80s, you had like Return of the Living Dead, which was fantastic. And, and it just kept evolving. And then, but...
Well, here's a question for you.
But my favorite type of horror movie, me personally, like I said, I could go through every genre.
Well, before you answer that, let's dig into this a little bit first.
Okay.
Because the episode would be over in 2 minutes if you just give your answer, and that would be it. Let's talk about the different decades of horror. Okay. Is there a reoccurring theme? Like, if you were to say, like, oh yeah, horror movies from the 40s, like, what would that mean? Like, what would that encapsulate?
Well, the horror movies for the 40s, that was like the second wind of 30s Universal classics.
All right,
like,
so
the 30s is like kind of like the birth of horror movies, in the sense
30s.
That's the 30s.
Okay.
I mean, you had silent movies, and the thing is 1922, you had Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You had a version of Frankenstein. You had Phantom of the Opera. These were all silent movies. And they were actually rather chilling. Like, when you look at Lon Chaney's makeup in the silent version of Phantom of the Opera, pretty creepy, still holds up. But nothing holds up more. And to this day, Max Schreck is Nosferatu, Count Orlok. I mean, that's still a pretty creepy look.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, it's not corny.
No.
I mean, they make it corny now, and they make it kind of funny now, but when you actually watch the silent movie Nosferatu, that's still a creepy image.
I mean, seriously.
The very first version of Dracula.
If you're going to watch it, seriously, like, watch it with all the lights out, by yourself, and it's a whole different experience. I have one question about that. Him. Was he really that tall?
He looked like a normal guy. It was weird. I mean, I don't know how tall he was, but when you see like actual like his like headshots, he just looks like a normal dude.
No, but in the movie, he's like really, really tall.
Yeah, I don't
Doesn't
know.
it really? I mean,
I don't know. I think they made it done like angles, imaging. I'm not sure how tall he was, but
Okay.
I know when you look at like just normal stills of Max Schreck, he was just like kind of like a normal looking dude. There's like behind the scene pictures of him just kind of like, there's this one that stands out and it's so brilliant. And it's not, it doesn't look doctored or anything.
Yeah.
But it's just him, like on the set of Nosferatu, and he's just kind of sitting in the shadows, but he's like looking at the camera, and you can just see a glint of his eye, and it's menacing. But yeah, you have the 30s.
30s is that
universal horror.
Yeah.
You get Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, and those movies are great, and they're timeless, and I love
Would
them.
you say there's something in common with those movies?
Well, those movies I think were, they're all stories. They were all based off books,
Okay.
except for The Mummy. But what made those movies, other than great direction, you had Todd Browning doing Dracula, you had Frank Whale doing Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, which were masterpieces. Bride of Frankenstein, out of the whole canon, is my personal favorite because it's brilliant, great acting, and it's funny.
Yeah.
And the music's awesome. But what made those movies
It's
so...
depressing. It's depressing because they make a bride for Frankenstein, and she looks at his ass, and she's like, nope. And then he like loses his mind, and I'm like, it's like,
No, that's life.
what a bummer.
You spend your whole life waiting for your dream girl, and then she looks at you and goes,
Yeah, like she
she doesn't even scream. She's just
and Frankenstein's
like,
looks like I'm not getting laid tonight.
friend.
Yo, yeah, you're in the friend zone, baby.
And then she looks at the creator like, how dare you? But no, that's literally her whole reaction. He's like, finally, friend. And then she's just like, like she can't even scream. It's so horrible. And it's just like, and then he just says, fuck it, I'm burning this place down.
Yeah.
I get that. This is the girl of my dreams. And she's just like, away with you. And you're like, well, I got a better idea. How about I just set this whole fucking place on fire with both of us in it?
Yeah.
We belong dead. But that's the 30s, and I think what really made those movies great too, aside from, great material, great stories, makeup. Jack Pierce was the makeup man at Universal, and he invented that entire Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, Wolfman. He did it all, and that's what I think makes all those characters complete icons. And then the 40s was kind of like the second wind of Universal horror. That's when you got the Wolfman, She-Wolf, you got Creature from the Black Lagoon, which was probably even early 50s, late 40s.
Yeah.
You got, that's when it started getting silly. That's when you started getting like the House of Dracula, the House of Frankenstein. And they just kept that train going as they usually do before it kind of just filtered out. And then the 50s kind of led into...
Oh, yeah, that's right. There was a lot of like tongue-in-cheek kind of stuff.
Yeah,
a lot of the
I
horror.
mean, they started hanging out with Abbott and Costello, and
But even like a lot of the horror movies in general start to become like corny, like funny, or whatever.
The gravy train runs out. You have that initial thing that happens, and then Hollywood, it's a business. They're like, well, let's keep doing this.
Well, what decade was it where you started having like the big monsters?
Creature features was like the
creatures.
50s.
That's the 50s.
That's when you started having like Them, and you had like a lot of Martians and
Yeah.
The Blob with Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of those movies are funny because you see like a lot of like heavy hitters like back in their working days, like the second Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Creature Returns. Clint Eastwood's in it. Like a really, really, really young Clint Eastwood. It's kind of cool.
What about the 60s then?
60s is when basically Hammer took over, and they pretty much reintroduced all those movies, but that's also when you started getting Hitchcock, because you had Psycho.
Yeah.
And that was like one of the very first plot twist movies. Like, you get the M. Night Shyamalama Ding Dong movies now, that everything's got what the twist? At the end of the movie, you go, what the twist? But Alfred Hitchcock, I think, started the twist.
Yeah.
Like,
would you say that with
Psycho?
Would you say like starting into the 60s, that's when you start to see the movies start to get serious again?
No.
Kind of? No.
I think, the 60s you had the Hammer horror films, you had Psycho, which you had suspense, which wasn't really horror, but it was a thriller.
Yeah.
And it created suspense. And then I think towards the end there, you started getting into the George, you got Night of the Living Dead. Which brings us to the 70s, where I really think horror filmmaking took off, and it created my favorite type of horror movie.
No, wait, hold on.
We're not there yet, but
no, but you think that like 70s were really...
70s is I think where it took off, because that is when it was such a melting pot of ideas, and they pushed the boundaries. I mean, up until the 60s, everything was still pretty tame. I mean, Psycho kind of screwed around with ratings and whatnot because there was a shower scene and this, that, and the other thing, and probably the first man in drag as a killer, but 70s really blew the doors off of like horror filmmaking, because there was just so much crazy shit that happened in the 70s.
Yeah.
You had movies like Last House on the Left, and that is like a snuff film. Like when you watch that, it's really disturbing. Movies like I Spit on Your Grave.
Oh my God, yeah.
I mean, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Looks like a snuff movie. It looks like one of those movies you'd watch in school on the reel. It's just like you're watching like an actual guy. It doesn't seem like a film. But that decade produced so many crazy... Halloween. That created the slasher genre, But it created... The 70s started psychological horror movies. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about The Exorcist.
You would consider that a psychological?
I consider that a psychological horror movie, and that is my favorite type of horror movie. I'm talking about a movie. I mean, you watch all the movies that I've mentioned up to now, and there's a novelty to them. There's it's got sentimental value. Some of them are kind of scary. Like if you watch The House on Haunted Hill, the original one. Yeah. And there's this scene where a guy, he's walking through the hallway, and there's this lady that just shows up. Just that's scary.
Yeah,
I can imagine being like a kid in the 50s and that's screwing you up. But The Exorcist gets under your skin, and it stays with me to this day.
Yeah,
and those are my favorite type of movies that they're not. Physically, you see something scary. But psychologically, it starts screwing. Like, that's a movie you watch, and then you go home, and you're, like, looking under the bed. And it's weird shit like that, and it's always had that effect on me. And there's probably 5 movies that have been made.
Well, it's funny. I thought you were going to lead up to saying that the slasher films would be your favorite type of movie.
Oh, no. That's probably my favorite kind of... I mean... That has, like, a special place in my heart, the slasher movies. I mean, it started with Halloween... Nightmare on Elm Street is a genuinely scary movie. Yeah. That's in that top 5 of movies that kind of got in my head. When you watch the first one, and granted I was like 8, but that first movie, music, atmosphere, material, I'd never seen anything like that, and it took me for a ride. What happened after Nightmare on Elm Street is a whole different thing. It's just like you get the sequels. Freddy Krueger becomes more like James Bond. They're fun. I always have a good time. Great soundtracks. You get frickin' Dawkins and Vinnie Vincent.
Great soundtracks there.
Great soundtracks.
Dawkins and Vinnie Vincent. When it comes to the slasher films, I thought that was going to be my answer myself. Yeah. My first blush, I would have been like, oh, well, slasher films. But I don't think so. I don't think that's it. The slasher films were like my first love. I was doing some thinking. I was thinking like, okay. And then I was thinking like, okay, is there a particular decade of movies that I like the best? And I couldn't come up with an answer because I like certain movies from all the different decades. And I thought, okay, well, what's my favorite horror movie? Which is The Shining. Which is weird because I consider it a Stanley Kubrick film more than like just a horror movie. But goddamn, I love that movie.
It's in my top 5.
And you were saying about like Freddy. the first one, before he really
Nightmare on Elm Street.
before he like
when
really
he was kind of an entity.
yeah, where before he became like welcome to prime time, bitch, you know, or became like a joke. And I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? I really have a soft spot for Spider Baby. The answer that I came up with for myself is this: charismatic. How do you say that word?
Charismatic.
Charismatic killers.
Yeah.
I like it when you have killers that have personality.
Right.
Now, I guess you could say like Michael Myers and Jason, but well, there's no personality there because they don't really say anything.
Michael Myers has the personality of a tennis shoe.
They don't say anything. But the thing is, like, what I always loved about The Shining is all the things that Jack says and does in the movie.
Well, that's just a dad losing his mind with his family.
How he taunts her.
I go through one of those episodes at least once a week with my son.
Like with the two girls in Spider Baby.
Okay, yeah.
You have like essentially they're like the killers of the movie, and you're like, you know, how they act and what they do. My favorite types of movies are charismatic killers. I'll even throw like the original Dracula, Bela Lugosi, charismatic.
He had a
killer.
personality.
Yeah.
Frankenstein did not have a
No.
personality. He kind of got one in Bride of Frankenstein. Yeah, I like the charismatic, and it's funny you bring up The Shining because that is a horror. But it's weird because it is a horror movie, but it is such a standalone movie in itself. It's weird because the thing about '80s, it wasn't just the slasher decade; it was also Stephen King's decade. Stephen King owned.
Oh
the
yeah,
80s.
yeah, that's right.
They made a movie about every book, and I watched every single one of them, and they were all. I remember Children of the Corn. That was just a short story. That movie was screwed up.
God, yeah.
I remember the first Children of the... I mean, they've made like 20 of them. But that first one, music. They had a good director behind it. The music was awesome. The acting was like... It wasn't terrible. And then the atmosphere. Like, Nebraska looks like a scary place. I mean, it's a wasteland.
Adding into that, Christine.
The great music.
The charismatic killer is the car.
Yeah. Playing the 50s songs. But no, it's weird because, Stephen King's all bummed out about how Stanley Kubrick made The Shining, but I think he actually made that something bigger and better. It's weird because when you watch... I've read The Shining. You've seen The Shining... TV movie, which is more like the book.
Yeah.
And
you watch it one time and you're like, well, I did that.
Well, exactly. It's like, okay, that's it. And it's the same
Hey,
when
Rebecca
you read the book.
Hey.
And it's the same when you read the book.
Hey, it's the guy from Wings.
You know, because the thing about those Shining books, it's AA. It's Alcoholics Anonymous. That when I've been through that whole program, and that's what's going on with that whole story. But no, Stanley Kubrick made it into something else.
Yeah.
And I think that on its own is just amazing, where you take subject matter. It's like a true definition of somebody adapting something and turning it into something like huge and bigger and better. But at the time, people didn't understand it. They were like, oh, this isn't what the book was, and blah, blah, blah. But it has percolated over time into a brilliant film. And it kind of falls under the category of what my favorite type of horror movie is, and it is psychological horror.
You would consider The Shining as psychological?
Yeah.
Okay.
Movies that make you think. Movies that get under your skin.
Yeah.
Things that once the movie's over, you can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
A24 is a new... it's been around for a while, but it's a film studio that's been pumping out a lot of clever... horror movies, like, for now. And I've been really pleased with what I've seen from them. But one of the first movies that they came out with stuck with me for a while, and that was Hereditary. Really dark, and it is scary. It is horror. You see some horrible things in there. But also, you walk away from it thinking about your life. And you can't stop thinking. And there's scenes in that movie that I'm still thinking about, and I still, that's the thing. I love a movie that has a visual.
Yeah.
You just think of a visual from the movie, and it haunts you. And those movies are the ones that stick with you forever, and those are my favorite type. The ones that actually, like, The Exorcist is with me forever.
How do you think Jake Lloyd feels playing Anakin Skywalker?
He lost his mind.
Yeah,
And he had to go to. He got in a lot of
he
trouble.
went and saw his movie that he's in, and it's like, oh shit, this is garbage.
I think I'm going to turn to a life of crime. No, he like developed schizophrenia.
And I bet you like Blair. I bet you Linda Blair when she went back and watched The Exorcist, she's like, fuck yeah, I did that shit. The Tiki Goth Club is way more than just this YouTube program. It's also a club that you can join. For $15, you can become a member of the Tiki Goth Club. You get your own membership card with your own number. I'll send you a couple stickers and a pin. I also have shirts for sale, patches, and glasses. If you're interested in any of this, head over to my website, tikigothclub.com, and everything's there for you. The Tiki Goth Club now has an official fanzine. It's called the Tiki Nomicon. It's chock filled with articles written by actual Tiki Goth Club members, articles written by myself. It talks about news, things that are going on in the Tiki Goth Club, and it can be all yours for $5, plus $5 in shipping and handling. Head over to tikigothclub.com to get your copy today.